I'm Bob Cobb from the Bassmaster, and this is LD and the MC.
It is Wednesday, March 31st. Hard to believe, the freaking last day of March, the day before April Fool's. And welcome to LD and the MC. So to state the obvious, obviously there is no LD. And before I go any further, I know it's the day before April Fool's, but this is not an April Fool's joke. I kind of wish it was. LD and the MC is over. I know, it sounds like a freaking April Fool's joke. It wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something I knew even last week when I did the show with Kevin. I thought Luke was just away for 1 week, and obviously that is not the case. Before the rumors start rampant, there is no hard feelings. I think what we were building here was something special. I think what we tried to do was pretty unique. You know what I mean? There was no sponsors. There was no agenda. It was just a good time and to build something cool. And I think we were well on our way. But as often happens in life, work gets in the way of a good time. And unfortunately, the season's gotten busier, more stress on all of us work-wise, and a lot more stress on Luke, so he has chosen to step away from this. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, he's done LBL for years before this ever started. I hate it, though. I mean, I really think what we did was something special, and I'm thankful for it, though. It was a lot of fun. Who knows? I mean, who knows what the future holds? I've learned many times, you never know what the future holds. But one thing I can guarantee you is what we built here goes beyond Luke. It goes beyond me. It's all of us. It's you guys. We built an incredible community of Humpers. And you guys, week after week, we've had fun. And we're still going to have fun. I don't know what the future for this show holds. I mean, I don't know whether you try to replace Luke, not an easy guy to replace. Or do we just bring in guests? Do I do it myself? Really, this is the time in the show where I turn to you guys, our community, and I say, what do you guys want to see? What do you see the future of this show? Evidently, I guess a name change is in order. I always thought our name change would be me getting fired. I thought it would be LD and the XMC, but no. So I wish Luke nothing but luck. Honestly, I'll still be an LBL listener. I'll still interact with that community. And I hate that this decision had to be made, but I don't think it's a decision that Luke made lightly. I think it was tough, and it's just kind of weird. But these things happen. And really, I thought about different ways to deal with this, and I dealt with it the same way that we deal with every single thing on this show. And that's with honesty. I mean, we will continue to be awkwardly honest at every single opportunity, because that's the only thing that is consistent with this show. Honesty. And I will continue to be honest with you. And I thank you for sticking with us. And I invite you to check back every single week. For those of you that have been watching on Luke's channel, you're going to have to subscribe on Facts Efficient right now, because it's only going to be on there. As far as the streaming, we're going to figure that all out. Luke's trying to figure out how to get everybody, kind of all the people that subscribed, however that works out. We'll figure that out. But for right now, we're on YouTube. We're on the Facts Efficient channel, and we ain't going anywhere. So check back next week and see what this freaking show is. I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know what it'll evolve to. Give me your ideas. I can guarantee you it will change, it will evolve, and it will always, or at least we will, or me, or frig, I don't know. We, as a show, as a community, will always try to deliver on Wednesday. So let's jump right into it. One of the big stories this week Obviously, the Auburn fishing team. Auburn fishing team was suspended for what looked like 2 years till 2022. I guess a year. There a lot of controversy around this. A lot of people. There was some violations. They tried to fish. Auburn said not to travel. Although in Alabama there was no travel restrictions and hasn't been for a long time, or outdoor restrictions. But they were told not to travel. They asked to fish unaffiliated. So then there was some steam because their boats were wrapped in Auburn. But anyways, long story short, the rock star of this story, in my opinion, one of the major rock stars, it was a lot. I mean, a lot of people involved. But Chad Hoover from Kayak Bass Fishing, I mean, that dude works with that team, but he literally took it on his shoulders, contacted a bunch of people, myself, Luke, a whole bunch of people in the industry, got us all screaming. And I just heard that they're still suspended. I mean, punishment. I mean, you can't just take the punishment away. It's kind of like being freaking grounded. I mean, you can shorten the grounding, but you just don't just be like, you're ungrounded. So I guess 3 weeks their suspension is. So they're going to miss a couple events and their season will be back. And that's awesome because what collegiate fishing has done for our sport is absolutely phenomenal. It's amazing how it's growing. It's amazing how it's changed. And so like they overcame, our show will too overcome. I mean, at the beginning of the week, you thought those guys weren't going to fish for a long time, and they're only a 3-week suspension. At the beginning of this show, you thought, oh no, it's all over. But we're going to continue on. We're going to soldier on with something different. I mean, I'll be honest, we might have some shitty, awkward conversations, but we will have conversations. And this show soldiers on in a big, big way with a very special edition of BP and the MC. Brandon Palaniuk, thank you for doing this. Let's start by finding out, where in the world are you?
I am in the beautiful state of Texas. I am sitting along the shorelines of our 2021 Classic venue, Lake Ray Roberts. I'm down here. This is the last week that we have to pre-practice. So I'm driving around looking, just because I've only been here once and I didn't drive around nearly as much when I did that. So I need to learn how to navigate this beast.
So you went to the scene of what should have been the week after the Classic. I mean, all it should have been is just people taking down signs and everything, but it is yet to happen. Talk to me about pre-practice, because you hear people talk about practice, but what are you trying to accomplish? I mean, when a tournament is that far away, are you trying to find fish, or what are you doing?
I mean, I try to find fish more so just in the fact of I want to catch a bass while I'm here. I'm not very good at just driving around and not making a cast. And sometimes that helps because you get an idea of what parts of the body of water are healthy and are holding a population of fish. But you have to go into that with caution, right? Or anytime you go into pre-practice, you have to go into it with caution, knowing that it's a long ways away. In our elite events, you have up to 28 to 30 days, whatever Monday follows in that window, before the actual event starts. The Classic is much different. When it was supposed to be in March, we had till December 31st. Now we have till April 5th. And that just, when it's that far out, so much is going to change that really for me this week, it's all about just learning how to navigate and being as efficient with my time as possible when we come back, because this place has 0 boat lanes. It's a flooded forest like every other Texas reservoir pretty much, and just learning how to navigate, right? Being able to go run the trails that I made on Google Earth and make sure that they are actually clear and navigable trails. That just saves you so much time when you come back here. And, because then we're going to have a limited amount of practice when you're actually trying to figure out where the fish are, what they're doing. And I want to spend the most time doing that. I don't want to spend time idling unnecessary water if I don't need to.
So how the heck do you figure that out without literally just taking a ridiculous amount of, you know what I mean? Like at one time it was your first time down at these bodies of water. And I've said this to you before. I mean, when I look at it, It's a daunting task. Like, without spending half your life in the service yard, how do you friggin' figure it out?
Well, I mean, thankfully we have technology now. Like, I don't know how years and years ago you would have had to have just like over the years met buddies that did it, or you'd just have to come down here and try to make a trail yourself. But thankfully, Mother Nature has blessed us with some low water and some droughts. I mean, those Google Earth images make a huge difference because they were anywhere from 6 to 14 foot low, depending on when the image was, compared to what it is now at full pool. And so there's a lot of stuff that you can see, even dry land, that you can just run across now, or what was dry land in those images. And so I just make a little path through there, and then I export it out of Google Earth, plug it into my Humminbirds, and there I have a path. And then I can go and I can run that and navigate that. And it saves so much time. And I've done that, a bunch of times. I mean, like, one story that I have on pre-practice where it actually helped big time is at Ross Barnett. I had never been there. I went and I was idling around, and I found this little backwater hole that was on this big flat, and it didn't show it on the map. Never caught a bass there in pre-practice. Practiced it during the event and never caught a bass in it during the event, or during practice for the event. And then the water came up, got blown out, and it actually pushed all of the fish off of that flat into that hole. And I caught the majority of my fish in the tournament in that hole. I mean, so times like that is when pre-practice can help, just getting an understanding of what the lake has to offer, and then using that knowledge when things change during the event to say, okay, maybe this is where the fish went, or this is where they're going.
How often does that happen? You hear you guys say stuff all the time, pre-fish suck, whatever, but it feels like you guys put stuff together a lot more during the event than anybody ever sees. And I know I give everybody a hard time about everybody's lying in pre-fish, but it really is, it's a big part of the sport. I mean, it's kind of like asking a football player what the game plan is before you see what the other team's throwing at you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is we do have weather delays under crazy circumstances, but like, if it rains, they're not like, oh, we're not going golfing today, right? Or we don't play our sport indoors. We're exposed to Mother Nature and what she throws at us. We're competing against another living creature. And so the only constant in fishing is change. And it's constantly changing every hour. And you have to be able to navigate that and be able to kind of flow and move with that. Pickwick a couple weeks ago was probably the opposite end of the spectrum, where everyone was saying we're crushing them in practice, and then we got the crazy water, and it actually made it a slightly tougher event for a lot of guys. And that happens all the time though, right? Is because you have a 4-day tournament and you have 3 days of practice preceding that. A week in a fish's life is a lot. And even more so as you move further north, where they spend 6 months under the ice.
Yeah.
Right? Now you have 6 months or you have 12 months that's condensed into 6 months.
Magnified.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they're constantly moving.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think that's one of the most people don't think of that. Those seasons happen in the north. It's just everything's magnified. There's not a big extended post spawn. There's not a big extended pre spawn. You know what I mean? It's all just magnified. Yep. But you mentioned flow. So, I mean, it makes a perfect segue to flow. And there is recently an Australian school, news just came out, that has banned the mullet. And the mullet is becoming a thing in bass fishing. I don't know whether we want to blame Seth Fighter or who we want to blame. It's not something you've ever embraced, but is it time for the mullet to leave and go back to where it came from?
Well, I don't exactly know where it came from, but where's it going to go? Like,
I don't know.
What are you going to do? And why would you ban the mullet? It's like the most sophisticated haircut you can really get.
Really?
I mean, business in the front, party in the back.
Why have
that's
you
been the staple of the mullet forever?
Why have you not embraced the mullet yourself?
Because I can't get past the awkwardness between the short and the actual, decent part.
The fringe.
Yeah, it just gets just nasty.
Tell me about your life, dude. I mean, we met I've talked about it a bunch of times. We started the same classic together. We met in the lobby of the hotel. But I look at you and I look what your life has become since then. And it really is ridiculous. You know, to me, it's you are the stereotypical chase your dreams and anything can happen. But I mean, your dreams, you obviously dream bigger than most. So, I mean, how does that happen? You know what I mean? Look, what is it? Just all drive? Is it natural ability? Is it a lot of things?
It's definitely a lot of things. I think part of it is just the way that I'm hardwired. Part of it was my upbringing, right? It was very, I guess, untraditional upbringing.
Like how?
And I think I'd call what I have a family tumbleweed, not a family tree, where it's like 2 and 2 and 2. It's a family tumbleweed, and it starts in the middle and then it just kind of explodes and goes everywhere, but none of the branches touch. That's a very important piece of it. None of the branches touch. So, but like I have an adopted dad, I have my biological father, and then I have a stepfather as well. And I grew up in a lot of different places, moved into a lot of different houses and trailers and stuff. That we don't even have time to get into that. That's for another podcast.
Okay.
But I was blessed to get this knowledge from a lot of different people and see people living their lives in different ways. And I guess early on, I just knew what I wanted to do, but by growing up in kind of like an untraditional type of family in that sense, there was never okay, you have to go to college and then get a job, work a job, and then die. That just wasn't ever a thing. And so for me, at 8 years old, I knew I wanted to fish tournaments for a living. I knew I wanted to fish. Well, it wasn't even the elite series when I was 8, but I knew I wanted to fish at the top level of bass. And I think through that, it just allowed me to calculate and navigate my life to get to that point, right? Everyone just sees you hoisting the trophy and sees all of, the magazine covers and all of those things, but they don't see where that groundwork is actually built. They don't see where those trophies are actually won. And that's won in the sacrifices that you make, right? Missing your friend's birthday parties, missing your brother's wedding. There's a lot of sacrifices that go into it. And that's why you always hear guys talk about thanking their families or their significant others or their friends at home, because they have to sacrifice that too, right? They live those sacrifices as well. And this sport, me and Tiff talked about this super early on, is that you have to have a level of selfishness to be successful at this sport. It's just the nature of the beast. It's so time consuming that there has to be a level of selfishness. And it's not that you're conceited or actually being selfish in the sense of what most people think, but you have to have a level of selfishness just in the fact of you're going to take time, you're going to block other people out. You're not going to go party with your friends in high school. I got a tournament on Saturday morning, I got to go to bed, I got to do my tackle Friday night. I did that for so many years that it just kind of became my normal, and it just continues to be that, right? continue to try to progress and look and say, okay, like how do I continue to evolve and be better than I was yesterday?
That drive in you blows me away. I mean, it because I look at, I mean, you freaking read self-help books and stuff like that. And if I look at you from the outside, I'm like, where does the Brandon Palaniuk self-help book come from? You know what I mean? Because I feel like from the outside, look at it, but maybe that just explains it right there, that the people that you think are there, they never stop working to be there.
Well, I just think there's never, like, there's always room for improvement and growth. And the second that you think, like, I'm good enough or I'm doing good enough or something, right? Whether that's in fishing or business or any brand or company, you will get past, right? I mean, if you don't continue to evolve and become better and stay relevant, you will get past. It doesn't matter how good your products are, or, you know, someone can make that same product or a better product. And so for me, like, I'm always like trying to combine all of these things, right? Of like understanding what makes other people successful, right? Whether it's in like entrepreneurial books and like educating myself on how other people found success, and then applying that to the sport that I love and being better, right? I mean, talk about like the fact that you have one life, and a lot of people, like, they don't take that serious enough. I don't think, like, we are all going to die.
Yeah.
For me, hopefully it's not running around on Ray Roberts practicing for the classic, spearing a tree.
Oh, please.
But at some point it's going to happen. Not spearing the tree, but at some point we're all going to die. And I take that serious in the fact that, like, I want to live my life to the fullest, right? And that doesn't mean like go out and party all the time and be a wild animal. That means like actually make change and enjoy your life. And so that's where a lot of, like, I started reading more and more, is trying to educate myself on that stuff and just take like the things that I kind of naturally have and then mold them into, I guess, like a better version of myself, or like the best version of myself possible. And I think everybody has that ability to do it if you're willing to take the time. But that's also a hard thing to do, right? Because you have to dig deep through everything to do that. But it's cool to read. Like, my favorite thing recently is learning about the limbic brain.
The
limbic brain.
Is that an Olympic event?
Kind of, yeah. Olympians use it. We all have it. It's your limbic brain. So in learning about that, I translate that to fishing. That's fishing the moment, right? So the limbic brain controls. So it's the inner part of your brain that essentially controls the why, but it controls like your emotion and your behavior, a lot of your long-term memory. So if you take that and you translate that into fishing terms, right? Think about, like, we always talk about, oh, spend as much time on the water. Well, when you're doing that, you're creating long-term memory scenarios, right? You're saying, I've seen this before. I've seen this situation before. That is in your long-term memory, right? You see it so often that it becomes habit or becomes second nature. And then also we talk about fishing the moment, right? Or just getting in the flow and the groove of things. Well, that comes from the emotion and the behavior of it, and that long-term memory all coming together to say, I've seen this experience or I've seen this situation before, and then having the behavior to go and say, okay, this is what I'm going to go do. And, you know, that's like, that happened to me. It happens often if you're willing to see it, but like, it was very visible at Santee Cooper last year. Like, I'm sitting at the dock and the first day I turned left, I went through top water, didn't catch anything. Every other day after that, I turn right and I go and I crush them. Day 4, we're sitting there. It's hot, it's muggy. And I've already told all the camera guys that I'm going to go right and I'm going to go up to where I'd been. And I'm sitting there and I grab Kyle, my camera guy. And I'm like, I'm going to go back to where we started day 1. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. He's like, why? I'm like, it just feels right. Like, it just, the weather, everything feels right. I'm like, if I can get one big one on top water, if I can catch a 6 or 7 pounder, that's going to be the difference maker. And I end up going there, and I went there with the intention of throwing top water. Well, I get there, the water was all blown out from the wind the day before. So that's where your limbic brain kicks in. You're like, okay, I've seen this situation. Instead of freaking out and just bailing, saying, well, I was going to throw a top water, can't do that, time to leave. I put the top water down, I pick up a bladed jig, I catch a 4-pounder, I catch a 3.5-pounder. And then I find a brush pile because a fish blows up and I'm running over to try to catch this fish. And I see a brush pile on my 360, but then I throw a swim bait through it and I throw a big 10-inch worm through it and realize that I'm getting moss on everything. So then I tie up a drop shot to keep my bait out of the moss, right? And so there's, like, you can see all of those little things happening, but that's fishing the moment, right? And I spent the first couple hours of my day fishing in that moment and not feeling rushed. And so when you're living in that, time seems to slow down. And if you can create that in a world where everybody is just like rushing around and in this crazy rat race, you perform at such a higher level. That's where I'm trying to be.
Is limbic brain?
That was really long.
No, that was freaking awesome. I mean, number one, some of the stuff you've thrown out here today, dude. Selfish is one of the terms that I've used for pro anglers or pro athletes in any, but you never hear athletes or anglers throw it out there because it's just got weird. But it is. There's a selfishness where I'm not going to be at your birthday party, and what you're saying with a limbic brain to me sounds like, you know, last week I talked to Kevin about what it feels like when you are that guy, you know, momentum, or whatever you want to call it. But there is a time, and we've seen it with Kevin a bunch. We've seen it with you several times, but there is times when you literally look like you can breathe fire. So we all see that from the outside. And maybe that is your limit. Number 2 questions, but is that your limbic brain, like in full effect? And also, what does that feel like to be that person that literally, you know what I mean? It's not an arrogance. It's I'm going to do my job and I know I'm going to get it done. What does that feel like?
I mean, part of that is coming from your limbic brain, right? Like having that behavior, that confidence, and then in making those decisions, right? And I think that's where most of that comes from, is the self-confidence aspect of it, in the fact that when you launch your boat, you know that you're going to go catch them. You don't know how you're going to catch them, but you just have the confidence that you're going to figure it out. And I always have this quote that I got from the guy that started me tournament fishing. And he says, they're going to be where you find them. And it sounds so simple, and it sounds like so cliche of like, oh yeah, obviously they're going to be where you find them. But if you really dig into it, and I use it all the time and remind myself of it, in the fact that of not trying to force what should be happening, but just going and literally catching them however you have to catch them. And that's kind of been like one of the biggest difference makers for damage control, like not just bombing a tournament, of, you know, like not trying to force a bite. Like, they're going to be where you find them, right? And that could be anywhere. We don't know where those fish are going to be. And so I think when a guy has that self-confidence, when he gets into that flow, that's where you see those things happen. And that's the best place you can be in, whether it's in tournament fishing, whether it's in your relationship, your everyday life, business. like to have that self-confidence is it just makes people better people.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? Like it's just overall it just makes it better. And so there's so much that ties into that, like in fishing and in your personal life.
You brought up your personal life and everything that you juggle, and you know this, dude. When you first started shooting, the YouTube series and everything that you do, I was as a friend, as I was like, man, I don't know if that's the right thing. Well, then you went and won Angler of the Year that year, and number one, does a camera motivate you? And number two, like how do you organize everything that is your life? I mean, your life has gone from living in the back of a truck to giant Tundra suites, and a production company and everything. How do you manage all of that? Because I'll be honest, like at the events, I get off the stage and I can go, you know what I mean? You do your stuff when you go off the stage, you say goodbye to everyone and you can go back to your room and you can kind of chill out. But every time I see you, there's a camera in your face, Kyle's shooting.
Yeah.
You're dealing with so many different. How do you deal with all of that?
Surrounding yourself with really good people, I think, is a huge part of it. Having Tiff on the road, managing a lot of like the day-to-day stuff, right? Even the simplest things like doing dishes and laundry. It is not the most glamorous job. But the fact that she does that and I don't have to gives me that extra 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to work on my tackle, to organize my tackle, clean the boat. And, just those little things, those are all the things, those day-to-day things that make the difference in the grand scheme of things, right? And what everybody sees in the productions of the videos and the blue trophies, it comes in those little day-to-day things. The same goes with Kyle, right? Like having Kyle travel with us, he's one of my best friends and he's amazing at what he does. He's one of, if not the best that I know at what he does. And he never went to film school. He just does it because he's passionate about it and he's good about it. Like when he started filming with me, he had never been on a bass boat before. He had never been to a fishing tournament. And so, and now he loves it, right? And like now he's part of that fishing family. And so I think surrounding yourself by good people is what allows me to be able to do it. It's what allows any successful business to be successful, because you just can't do it all on your own. It's impossible. And so for me, it's just managing the chaos and going through that and figuring out who's best in certain areas and then letting them kind of have the freedom to do those things and work as a team. And that's helped me a ton. And I guess that's what has allowed me to get to this point. I'd be able to have like an awesome trailer. Obviously I wouldn't be able to do that by myself. And then having the sponsors and stuff that kind of understand that and are willing to do it. And then I would say like the camera motivates me. I didn't intend on it being that. When I started it, I wanted to film all of that stuff that people don't see. All of the stuff that leads to the blue trophies and the titles and the accolades. And through that process, I actually figured out that I end up talking to the camera and I'm talking out loud about what's going on in my head. And it actually helps me process it better on the water, because I'm not only thinking in my head, I'm actually speaking it. And there's been times where I've said something like 3 or 4 times, but I'm still doing the same thing, right? I'm like, oh, I should go flip those docks over there. Man, those docks look really good. And then finally I'm like, why don't you just go flip the docks? Like, why are you doing the same thing and not getting a bite? Like, go flip the docks. Obviously there's something in your limbic brain telling you to go flip those docks. go flip the docks. And I think that's where it's really helped me a lot, right? Is like I started them to be more on the entertainment side of things, and they've became way more educational for the fans and for myself.
Did you learn anything from it that you didn't know? You know what I mean? Aside from like those moments, was there anything like that you watched and you're like, oh, good Lord, I had no idea I did that?
I say a lot of really dumb stuff. There's a lot of really dumb stuff that gets said that never makes the cuts. I would say there's little things like hook sets and stuff that I've actually adjusted and fine-tuned a little bit to change. There were some times where I had a bad habit of wanting to set the hook too low when I was flipping. I would want to kind of set it to the side and not over my shoulder. And so I've actually been able to like go back and watch like, oh, why did I miss that one? And actually learn why you missed that fish or why you lost it and be able to fine tune that.
Well, you can edit out the screw ups on your videos, but we're not going to edit them out here. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And
oh gosh,
I mean, I wish I was prepared for this. I'd be a lot more professional if I was. But I'm just going to throw out just some adjectives, and I want you to pick an Elite Series pro and tell me who it is. Who's the most intimidating Elite Series pro?
Like current Elite Series pro?
Well, yeah. Or non-current. I mean, but we have no borders. We have no walls here. So any pro angler, who's the most intimidating one ever for you?
The most intimidating one ever for me is Denny Brower.
Me too.
He just like had this look. And I remember at I think it was my rookie year at the Arkansas River.
Oh, I remember that one.
The one that he won. And I went in fishing this brush pile, and he came over there and he thought I was stealing all of his stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Danny, I had no idea you're fishing this brush pile. You were 150 yards over there. But in my mind, I'm like heartbroken and fearful for my life because Denny's always been one of my favorite anglers. And this is like one of the first interactions I've had with him of him thinking that I'm hole jumping him when really I had no idea. And then right as I'm about to pick up my trolling motor and leave, I see him. Here he comes again. He's on the big motor. I'm like, oh gosh, he's about to cuss me out again. And he comes over and he's like, hey, just want to apologize. You're right. I didn't know that brush pile was over there. I thought you were going to be coming in and fishing all the stuff I'm fishing. He's like, I appreciate you not coming in on top of me. And I was like, all right, that was awesome. Right. And then and then the rest of the event, I said, hey, Denny, I'm not going to go fish that brush pile. There's fish in it. If you want to catch them out of it, fish it. You got a shot to win. And, but I remember like when he was idling at me, I felt like his eyes were burning through my soul. It was like, when like, you're around a guy that you have idolized forever. And then all of a sudden he is not happy with the way that like happy with you as a person. I'm like, oh gosh, this is not good.
All right. Who is the funniest dude on tour?
I mean, Swindle is the like easy answer.
Yes, of course.
Because he's the most boisterous one. But I think, oh man, one of the dudes that just cracks me up the most is John Cox. Just in his everyday life and his approach to fishing, like just who he is as a human. And that's not like in a derogatory way. He's just like, the things he says and the way he goes about life, he's just so happy-go-lucky all the time, it seems like, that I just laugh sometimes, right? And he's like, yeah, I'll turn my hair into cornrows because Dave got 10,000 likes on a post. Sure. Like that kind of stuff, I just laugh at. I'm like, that's pretty awesome.
Do you think the worst thing that could ever happen to John Cox is if somebody forced him to to fish a tournament just once a month. You know what I mean? Like, part of the magic of him is that he doesn't focus on anything but fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Right. And I mean, he has the family and everything that's willing to go through those sacrifices. But when you fish that much, it's easier to flip that switch on and off, right? And be able to just focus on the fishing. I mean, I see that in myself sometimes, like last fall, like where you're just week to week to week to week. You don't have time to second guess anything. You're going and fishing. You told John, he's like, you get to fish one tournament a month. He would spend the other 3 weeks thinking about that one tournament, spinning himself out, right? They end up seeing John Cox out there drop shotting in 50 foot of water because he thought some crazy idea that was a good idea. But in reality, it's like, no, John, you need to go back to the bank.
It's true. I mean, the guy hasn't had time to put. I mean, everybody talks about forward-facing sonar. He has got one in the back of his truck, hasn't even put it on, but he hasn't slowed him down at all. I mean, he's doing incredible. Okay, who's the most annoying other than me? Scared to answer this one, aren't you? You knew I'd put you on the spot.
Most annoying. Chris Johnston on the water.
I agree.
Like, I've only fished against him for a year and like 3 tournaments, and every single time, like, I run into him on the water, and I'm like, how do we keep running into each other? Right? It's like he's that guy that I like turn around the corner, just ran 25 miles, and you're gonna rip into this pocket to flip this one laydown, and there he is, bam, parked on the laydown. You're like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, he is. He is kind of a Newman. He is a Newman. All right, I'll stop putting you on the spot. I'll give you one last question. What makes fishing the greatest sport on earth?
Oh man, several reasons. One, I would say, is the fans that we have. I feel like we have the most hardcore, passionate fans out of any sport because they live it day in and day out. I mean, and they're still competing, and I think that makes a big difference, right? Is in the fact that there's guys watching us compete on the week, and then they are competing on their home legs on the weekend. You don't really see that in like football and stuff unless they're playing like rec league flag football or something. You know, and it's not the same. Like, they're competing to win. They're not just competing for a good time. And so like they're very, very passionate. And I think that makes it very different. Another thing is the fact that it's attainable for anyone, right? I mean, one of the like my biggest pet peeves is keyboard ninjas coming out of the mom's basement and saying that, like, oh, I could do that if I had the money, or, you know, oh, I could do that if I didn't have this or that, or if I had that. They're just not willing to sacrifice, right? Like, they're just not willing to go and through the dirt to get to that. And so they just sit on the sidelines and comment of how they could, but they didn't. You know, and gosh, that drives me nuts because I know so many guys that came from nothing that, you know, made it to the Elite Series, that make a living catching and chasing bass. And then I know the guys on the opposite end of the spectrum that have all the money in the world, but they're not willing to make the sacrifices to go do it. And they're phenomenal anglers, right? They could compete on the Elite Series, but they're not willing to go make those sacrifices. They're not willing to miss out on certain things, or, you know, risk their job and their paid for health insurance to go do it. And I see that all the time. And So I think that's one thing that makes it awesome, right? It doesn't matter where you come from, any of that. The other one being the fact that it's ever changing. It's never the same. We're competing in an arena that is controlled by Mother Nature. It's not controlled by humans. And we're fishing against a living creature that lives their life based on whatever those conditions are thrown at them, which is completely opposite of how we live our lives. And so you're like trying to attain and like perfect the unperfectible, because it's constantly changing. Like as soon as you perfect something, and then it changes again. And I think that's one thing that makes it so unique. Like that's the one thing that I think allows guys like Rick Clunn to continue to do it for years and years and years and still have a love for it.
Yeah, and I think what makes the sport so special, in my opinion, is the anglers, is the people that, because and I really think that's one of the major reasons that you guys, you hear that a lot. You hear people say stuff about, oh, pro anglers are different and this sort of thing. And I really do think you guys are, but I think it's a lot of what you just said there. It's because you didn't get into this to get rich. I mean, there's been plenty of people who have made a lot of money fishing, but that wasn't your goal in any other sport. I mean, if you're a hockey player growing up, a football player, people are going to put their arm around you. You're going to have, it's going to turn into a business by the time you have zits, and it's going to become more and more of a business until the day that you retire. But in fishing, I mean, literally, it's just something you want to do. And most people that you tell about it growing up, they laugh at you and say it's kind of unachievable, but none of that matters. So I think that, most people, I mean, I don't know what your goal was, but most people I know, their goal was, I just want to fish. I just want to fish for a living. I want to figure out a way to do this for a living. And I think that's what makes a lot of you guys so special.
I don't even know if I had a goal of like I just knew, I didn't have like an end goal of like, oh, I just want to make it there and then I'll be happy. It was like, I wanted to compete fishing for a living. And like, that was the goal, right? The goal was to make it to the Elite Series, but it wasn't like it just ended there. It wasn't like, oh, cool, we made it. Now I'm good to go. It's like, it's a never evolving goal. And it wasn't like, I wasn't driven by that goal, right? I wasn't driven by, oh, I want to make the Elite Series. It was literally a decision of, I mentally and physically cannot live without this. This is what I need to be doing for the rest of my life. Like, if I had any like hard times in my life, I could go fishing and it seemed like the entire world was okay. And I've recognized that early on, that like, no matter what bad things were happening, that there was never any, like, I was never on the water on my boat and be like, man, this is really terrible. Like I could always go to that and it was always better than, the worst thing. And I think that makes it so special. I try to tell high school kids that all the time, right? Because we're getting so many new anglers into it and they're like, oh, I want to do it for a living and this and that. I'm like, look, the reality of it is there's only 100 of us a year on the Elite Series. And if you want to make it there, like, you are going to have to sacrifice, and most of you just aren't going to be willing to do that. So if you can identify that you physically and mentally cannot live without it, then you will have a shot. I don't care how much money your parents have, or, how many sponsors you have, or what's provided or given to you. If you don't have that, you won't make it, or you might make it, but then you're just going to burn out. And then you'll just be a guy that came on and left.
Well, one thing is evident from this conversation, Brandon, and I mean, I it's not breaking news for anybody, but I find it humorous that you say you didn't have a goal, because I don't know that you have goals, because you have figured. I mean, literally, I'll be honest. I'm a lot older than you, and it's just now in my life that I'm figuring out that one of the biggest fallacies that we were all taught when we were kids is happily ever after, because happily ever after is total bullshit, really, because it doesn't matter what you have. You could win every tournament this year, which is always your goal, which I'd love you to achieve one time. But 10 years from now, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You could have 1 million YouTube subscribers, and if you don't continually put in the work to there is no happily ever after. Happily ever after is being happy with the person you are and the life you're living. So my last question, and this really is my last question, is what is your goal?
The simplest form of it is to be better than I was yesterday. And that's kind of that's life, business, fishing, right? Is like continually making those micro adjustments that at the end of your life, like who shows up at your funeral is the best judgment, rather than like just making those micro adjustments, right? It's not like you can just say, oh, I'm going to do this and then the rest of my life is phenomenal, right? Or, you know, like that's one of the biggest things that I see, or like the biggest mistakes I see people make is like, oh, if I just get to here, then I'm good. That's not the case. Like, you don't just make it to the Elite Series and then you have all the sponsorship money and you just do it for a living and you live happily ever after, right? Like, you have to get there and then you have to perform and probably put in more work than you did before. Like, you're probably going to fish less and put in more work, but you're going to get to do it for a living and you're not going to have to go work a 9 to 5. And I think that's like something that just people don't understand, right? There's not that trying to attain that like happily ever after is just the means to an end. Like, why would you set a goal to say like, oh, I'm just trying to get here? Because then what if you attain it? Then where are you going to go? And so you have to be cautious and set those goals to like win every Elite Series event in a year. Now, if I do that, there's still room for improvement, right? Because I'll be like, well, now I got to win 9 and all 6 opens and the classics or something. It's not probable, but it's possible, right? I have the opportunity to do it.
Dude, you're an amazing, amazing little creature. I love you. You're my little brother. I mean, you amaze me because you. I mean, like a lot of people in my life, you're a lot smarter than me, and I thank you for sharing some of that motivation and brains with our Humpers here today. This has been a very special edition of
BP
and the MC.
And the MC.
Perfect. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
That was great.